Hi everybody, welcome to my first video in a series about designing a healing UI. This first video is just a very brief introduction into what you look for in a healing UI and the three different main styles of healing there are and which one might be best suited for you. So a little bit about healing UIs generally. The most important thing with a healing UI is for you to know where everything is and for you to have enough space to see the mechanics of the fight. It's very easy to get bogged down by having boss timers and weak auras and raid frames blocking important parts of your screen so that you can't see mechanics or you can't see what you're standing in. The default UI can be quite bad for this because of the layout of the action bars, where you have the two lines at the bottom, which means you have to push everything up, all your raid frames and your weak auras and your unit frames and things, which ends up giving you less space around your character. As you can see here, I've got my unit frames and my raid frames and my weak auras and my action bars all in this kind of section of the screen here, which leaves me all around my character and up here and along here, free for me to see the fight platform and mechanics and what other people in the fight are doing and things. And that's really valuable as a healer because you need to be able to see at a glance where certain people might be, where certain mechanics might be coming from, where you need to be in relation to the rest of the raid. So when you're designing your UI, the first thing to bear in mind is to make it clear around your character, give yourself enough screen real estate so that you can see mechanics and react accordingly. The next big healing UI thing is obviously your raid frames. There are various different types of raid frames. There's a Blizzard default, there's Voodoo, there's Grid 2, and various other raid frames. Main thing with all of these is to choose somewhere on your screen that it makes it easy for you to see and use them. Some people, like myself, have them down in this section here in the middle at the bottom. Other people might prefer to have them up in the top left or in the top right, or bottom left or bottom right. It doesn't really matter where they are. The main thing is that they are somewhere that you can easily get to and somewhere that doesn't take your focus away from your character and what's going on around you. If you have your raid frames somewhere really obscure, that means you have to keep moving your head and your eyes all the way maybe to completely at the top left here, and it means that it's going to be taking your attention away from what's going on around your character here. So think about that when you're deciding what the best place is to have your raid frames. Another important thing that's important to have on your raid frames is the tracking of your HOTS and of debuffs. It's really important to be able to see what players already have HOTS from you, so you're not recasting on the same player. If somebody's got an enveloping mist taking on them, then you don't want to be casting another enveloping mist on them, and likewise with renewing mist, you don't want to be casting that on people who already have it. By tracking your HOTS on your frames, you can make sure you never do that, and that's really important as well for Essence Font, because you want to capitalize on the Essence Font HOT here so you get the double ticks of Gusts of Mist or Mastery. So you need to be able to see who's got that HOT so that you can capitalize on it best. It's obviously very important to see debuffs as well. You need to be able to see who's got important debuffs that might need dispelling or who's got debuffs that require targeted healing. Most raid frames show most of these by default, but there are things you can do to make certain ones more visible if it's a very important debuff that your raid is having problems handling with healing wise. You can make it kind of much more obvious so that you can see easily when someone has got it and know to focus on them. So that's kind of the basics of what you would look for in a UI. I'm going to speak just fairly briefly about the three different styles of healing that there are. And I'm going to start with the one that's probably most familiar to you if you are a DPS player who is looking to learn how to heal. This is probably the way that many of us started to heal. I know when I started playing back in vanilla, this was the method that I chose, just because it seemed like the most intuitive if you've been playing DPS for a period of time. And that is simply just to click on somebody in your raid frame. So you select them and then press the button on your keyboard that corresponds with the heal. So I've got Vivify here on button 1, so I'll just press button 1 and that casts Vivify. The benefits of this are that it's really easy and doesn't really require any other adjustments to playstyle or doing things like macros or binding mouse buttons and things. It's simply, you just put your healing spells on your bars like you would your DPS spells. If you're completely new to healing and are looking for the best way to heal, I wouldn't suggest this method. While it does work and it does the job, it's not really as efficient as the other two methods, and that's because when you think about how you're having to heal here, you're having to expend 2 actions for the same result. So you're having to left click with your right hand, or your left hand I suppose if you're left-handed, and then you're having to press, with your other hand, you're having to press a button on your keyboard. And that's 2 discrete actions there. And while you can do them pretty much simultaneously, it's still a lot more work than the other 2 options that I'm going to go into after this. The other kind of big negative of this is that if you are in melee and you're DPSing, you're going to keep losing your target if you're having to click to target people and then cast a heal on them. And as a Mistweaver, you're often going to be in melee and DPSing to get mana back or just to help contribute something to the group. And if you're constantly losing your target by having to click on people, that's going to get very frustrating and difficult to kind of maximise the amount of damage that you do and the amount of mana that you get back if you're using the Spirit of the Crane talent. So my suggestion, if you still want to keep the your healing spells on your action bars, is to use mouse over macros instead. And mouse over macros, you can get pretty much copy templates for these. They're all over the internet, and you just have to put in your particular spell names. You can see I've got one ready here that's a Vivify one, so I'm going to put that on button 2. And that works in a similar way to the healing style that we just discussed, but instead of having to click on a mouse frame, all you have to do is move your mouse over it, and then if I press 2, it'll cast Vivify. So right away you can see that is a bit more efficient because I'm not having to click and then press, I'm just having to mouse over and then press. And it also means that if I've got something targeted, like this Raider's training bag here, if I want to heal somebody and I use my mouse over macro, I don't lose my target. So I can just carry on DPSing or doing whatever I want to do after I'm done with that. Or if that was a mob I was trying to crowd control, for instance, it would be useful to not have to deselect that every time I healed somebody, so I could keep an eye on it. So mouse over macros are one of the more popular methods of healing, and if you want to stick to having your healing spells on your keyboard, then that's what I would definitely suggest doing. There is a third option, and that's mouse-bind healing. And that's what I specifically use. You might have seen at the start of the video that I don't actually have any of my kind of targeted healing spells on my unit, on my action bars here. All I've got are things like Chi Burst or Essence Font and my Refreshing Jade Wind. It's like non-targeted spells, and that's because I have all my spells bound to mouse click. So I'll just show you here. So with my left button, I've just kept that as target because some people actually bind spells to left click, but I can't get used to that. I like being able to left click and actually target somebody for, you know, inspecting them or other things like that. I just find that much easier. But I do have my right click bound to something else. So when I mouse over somebody and I right click, it will cast Renewing Mist. When I mouse over somebody and I move my mouse wheel down, it will do Vivify. When I do it up, it will do enveloping mist. Now the big kind of bonus for me with this style is that it completely frees up my left hand for movement. I have quite small hands, so having to move and press numbers or other buttons at the same time can sometimes be quite difficult. Having them all on the mouse means that I've got complete kind of freedom of my left hand for movement here while healing. It also means that I can have my DPS spells on 1, 2 and 3, my main kind of buttons here for DPSing, because I don't need to have that taken up with spells, because they're all just bound to mouse combos. You can bind kind of various combos. You can just have, what's called with no modifiers, which is when you're not using Shift or Alt or Control. And I have like my most common healing spells bound that way because things that I'm casting a lot, I don't want to have to use modifiers for. Shift is fine. I have Shift left click as a fuse and Shift right click as dispel, and I can hit those easily enough. I find Control quite awkward to hit on a regular basis. It's fine, for doing like a one-off spell every so often, but if I had to do that, for a rotational spell like Renewing Mist or something like that, I'd find it quite difficult very soon. So that's why my Control left click is Life Cocoon, because that's not something I'm ever going to be spamming. It's something that I can only use once every 3 minutes, and although it's a slightly more awkward keybind for me, it doesn't really matter because I'm not using it particularly often. So if I was going to recommend a style of healing for you, it would be mouse over macros or mouse bind healing. Both have their benefits. I prefer mouse bind healing personally, just because I like having my left hand free to do movement and do DPS spells and whatnot with, but mouse over macros work fine. If you are using the first style, which is clicking and then pressing a button, and you're not really very happy with it, then it doesn't take as long as you might think to adjust to a new style of healing. Just go into LFR, do like a full clear of LFR, where it doesn't really matter what you do, and get used to where your spells are and find out what buttons are easiest for you to hit as well. When I was choosing my mouse binds for this character, I changed things around a couple of times because when I actually started doing them in practice, I found out actually that's a bit of an awkward bind for me to make on a regular basis. It would be better if, that was Renewing Mist as right click instead of middle mouse button or something like that. So it's just about finding something that's comfortable for you and that allows you to be as efficient as possible while healing people. Next time I'm probably going to look at raid frames themselves, look at some of the main ones and how to go about setting up just a basic raid frame that's suitable for your needs. I'm also going to talk about weak auras, how to make your own from templates, and how to import other people's weak auras and where to find weak auras as well. I hope you found this useful. If there's anything you'd like to see included in these videos for the future, then just send me a message on Discord or find me in game or put a comment on the Pika Serenity website. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Thank you.